Hi, my name is Patrick Curtis, CEO and founder of Wall Street Oasis, formerly an investment banker and private equity professional. I've been running WSO for over 18 years. We now have over 1 million registered members, and we've helped thousands of students place into the most competitive careers. In this video, I have a chat with Emily Zang, one of our WSO Academy students that broke into Greenhill Restructuring in New York from Canada. We go over how she did it, how WSO Academy helped her, and her one key takeaway after going through recruiting. Enjoy. All right, Emily, thanks so much for joining us here. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're getting ready to move out of the dorm, right? Finishing up second year. So love to just start. So just a quick summary bio of like who you are, where you are, and yeah, we'll just start there.
Yeah, so my name's Emily. I'm currently studying at Western University. I was in philosophy for my first 2 years and now doing business with Ivey. So I am Canadian and was very unfamiliar with recruiting in general, and I guess the US recruiting scene as well.
Awesome. So explain to the people who aren't familiar, I guess Ivey is one of the top business schools, right? So in Canada. So in terms of placements in Canada, it's pretty strong, right?
So placements in Canada, it's pretty strong. I think what's a bit different is that we have the 2+2 program. Essentially, you another major of your choosing for the first 2 years, and then you move into business for your last 2 years. Yeah. So I was in philosophy.
Cool. And then, so when you started first year, were you investment banking all the way, or as a philosophy major, it's kind of different, right?
I didn't know what investment banking was. I thought you just traded stocks based off the little charts on a day basis. I know at least at Western, there's very set pipelines for those who knew from day one they wanted to do it. There's honestly some really great investment clubs, finance clubs that'll help you do that. Mm-hmm. But I was actually very much set on consulting instead. So that's what I spent all my time and energy on. So I had no idea what finance was or how to even recruit, to be honest.
Got it. So when did kind of the switch flip? Was it end of first year, or was it beginning of second year? I'd be curious because I know you joined us what I would consider very late for a second year for a sophomore or second year student, because I think it was December when you joined us and you were in the January cohort, which by then, at least for the US market, recruiting had kicked off for your junior summer recruiting. So I'd love at least a handful of banks.
So I joined actually even later than what you think it was. So when I joined, I was in my first semester of third year. So I'm actually not a sophomore. Yeah. So what happened was there was actually this diversity program that Ivey runs. It's the Women's Asset Management Program. Mm-hmm. If I think in US they have Women Who Invest, Girls Who Invest. Yep. I did that and I got placed at a hedge fund, which I really enjoyed, loved learning about looking at different stocks and numbers. So I thought, you know what, I would do that. But at that point, when I had decided to recruit for finance or even realize that, okay, asset management's interesting, this was summer of my second year heading into third year.
Oh, so you were super late.
So I was super late. So by then, all the investment banking, all the US recruiting had wrapped up for junior summer. Yeah. So I starting to look for my junior summer at that point. Mm-hmm. But luckily for me, a lot of the pensions in Canada recruit right around that time. And because of that diversity program, I had that network. So I recruited and I got teachers for private credit full-time.
And for people who aren't familiar, teachers is kind of one of the top pension funds in Canada, right? So it's not like you were starting from zero, you had a high GPA and all these things, you're in a great school, but it was just your timing was took a little while to figure out where you were going.
My timing was completely off. And at that point, I had gotten all my positions from just either programs or teachers. I didn't network. It was a cold application. They just happened to like me throughout the interview process. Yeah. And I think at that point, I realized that the Canadian landscape for finance was very, very small. It's there wasn't much to go. And even then, the pipeline from internship to full-time wasn't as known or even prominent as in the US.
Yeah. And I think you had mentioned the conversion from internship to full-time offer rates at some of the pension funds was also a little bit scary just because they don't typically hire out. Like in the US, it's it tends to, or even the Canadian banks, it tends to be what 80-90% of the interns get full-time offers. Of course, it was a little bit lower this past year, but I think that was something else I think you had expressed to me when you were going through the program. It's like, I really need an internship at a bank because it's very risky to go to the pension fund and try to go straight to the buy side when the offer rates are so low. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, I think another huge thing that you guys helped me with was I came into the program trying to recruit for full time. So try to go straight into the full time pipeline. Even though the timelines, it would give me a bit more time.
Yeah.
But in speaking to you, you were just saying that it's a lot easier to convert from an internship than trying to enter the full time pool. So I think that's where I made the decision to essentially take a gap year and extend my graduation. So that's how I became a sophomore on paper.
All the late people, listen up. Yeah.
So I think it was one of those things where it's like, okay, I was late to the game.
I remember now. Yeah, I remember having this conversation. Like, you should really push your graduation date back because you're over on paper. You were, a pretty strong candidate if you just had the time. Your timing was just so late that I wanted you to have that shot. So my point is, even with the gap year, you were late. Like, even with the gap year, you were coming in January for the US recruiting. It was like right before it kicked off. So let's talk about that. So like, why come to Academy? You have so many resources at Ivey. Like, what was it because you were late? Was it because you had missed the clubs, or what was it?
I think it was two reasons. So one, it was because I was late. And two, at that time, I was still exploring options outside of banking. So not just your traditional like 2 and out. I was thinking, okay, what if I pursue some direct into buy side opportunities?
Yeah.
I was really interested in credit, which was not as talked about in a lot of investment clubs. I think the other thing with my school.
Did you speak with Michael Lee, private credit?
Yes.
Whenever
yes.
I'm interested. Okay, so cool.
I spent all my sessions with him, and he was like a great mentor to kind of guide through the process.
Yeah.
The main thing was just I wasn't a part of any of the investment clubs. You had to apply very early on. You had to have a track record of wanting to be in finance, and I was late. It was
so if you don't know at 18 years old, basically, it's very hard.
Yeah, it's a great pipeline for those who know at 18 years old, but it's very difficult for people who want to pivot. So I came to Academy because I needed the efficient way. I needed, the quick way, the process that has been proven to work.
Yeah.
And that's what really helped me being so behind.
So, okay. So you join, was it what you expected when you first joined? Was it different? I'd love to hear obviously there's the resume review, LinkedIn profile audit. I'm sure we had some modifications on your resume, but that's probably not where the biggest value add was for you, I'm guessing, from what I remember. Talk to me about that. Like, when you came in, what was it like? Did you attend any boot camps? Did you do or did you just jump straight into the mock interviews and the interview prep because you were so close to recruiting?
Because I was so close to recruiting, actually the biggest source of help for me from Academy was two things. So the first being able to talk to, professionals in the industry who knew what options were out there. Mm-hmm. And then the second was, actually the process. It's like, okay, how do you do outreach? How many chats should you be doing a week? Like, where's the most efficient way to outreach? Mm-hmm. On the first part, it was very much, I remember having the talk and he's like, oh, why don't you go do restructuring? You're interested in credit. And I just looked at him. I'm like, what's restructuring? So he's after he giving me a few resources to look at, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. I had initially not wanted to do banking so much just because I wasn't interested in the M&A side.
Yeah.
More so doing it just to get to the buy side as it means. But I thought restructuring something that I could really get behind. It was quite interesting. Mm-hmm. So just having that talk and being exposed to another side of the industry to push me towards that direction was really helpful.
And it made a lot of sense with your private credit kind of internship experience too. You already had a little bit of experience on the debt side, right? Where you could understand complex capital structures a little bit better than maybe some of the other applicants, right?
So it was one of those things I'm like, okay, this is a more direct pipeline to what I want. And then the second part with outreach was he kind of helped me be like, okay, this is how many people you need to reach out to in a day to even hit metrics. This is how you should be at least structuring a chat. Because at that point, I maybe had 10 coffee chats throughout 3 years in my entire life. I hadn't done it before, which is, it's a disadvantage when the entire industry relies on being able to network.
Yeah.
So having those resources and a very concentrated strategy to kind of capitalize on the very short amount of time I had helped me land the chats and really helped me get the interviews that, I was looking for.
Yeah, just to be clear, you were targeting, U.S.-based roles, New York primarily, right? So, and you're targeting all the kind of top restructuring shops at that point, right? Like the Rothschild, Evercore, 𝗟𝗟𝗡𝗗𝗏 of the world, right? In terms of, and so you said you had done 10 coffee chats before. How many did you end up doing, would you say, in like the couple months after you joined the academy?
I remember there was a month I had at least 2 to 3 chats every single day for at least 3 weeks, at least like 50, 60 chats.
That's insane. So yeah. So obviously what you were doing was working. You got into a decent amount of interview processes, right? And you made it to some of the most competitive super days, right? Out there. Tell me, like, interview prep. Were you in the program when we were scoring mock interviews, or near the end, were you getting scored or not?
Near the end, I was getting scored, which is actually really helpful. Because I like to work with numbers. So there's a number metric to be like, okay, this is where you need to work on.
Yeah.
So with interview prep, it was really helpful to go through the courses to kind of refresh on the content. I had taken finance courses through our 3rd-year Ivey Business School program. I'd taken some with like the diversity program, but it was a lot of learning the restructuring aspect of it. And I think there was some designated mentors who were in restructuring who really grilled me on the tough questions that helped during my mocks. And then I also, I attended a few boot camps here and there, but for me, it was mainly getting the reps in with the mocks and really like ironing out my story just because it was a little convoluted, I guess you could say.
So tell me, like, the results, like how many first rounds, how many second rounds or super days, and then obviously once you had the offer, you accepted, but give the reveal of kind of of where you ended up at. I mean, I think it was very impressive. Everyone knows that's in Canada how tough it is to get down to the U.S. market. Obviously, there's a little bit more of the visa issue here, easier with the what is it, T1N, but still not as easy to get in.
Yeah, I think it was also, I didn't apply to as many roles as, any other people because I knew I was against that battle where it's like, okay, I'm not going to get an interview here purely because of visa issues.
Yeah.
And because I was only targeting restructuring. So if we're looking at applications, no PJT, Evercore were open, Greenhill was open, 𝗟𝗟𝗡𝗗𝗏 was a maybe, 𝗟𝗚𝗟𝗡𝗗𝗏, turns out they weren't sponsoring, but I put the application in. So that was maybe 5.
Yeah, and then, not a lot.
Not a lot. And then I threw out my application to a few buy-side firms as well.
Yep.
But KKR wasn't sponsoring. And then there was Ares, Blackstone, and like 𝗟𝗟𝗡𝗗𝗏. So I guess first round interviews, I had around 4 or 5, I believe.
It's a pretty good hit rate. It's a pretty good hit rate.
Considering like the limited number of applications I actually put out.
Yeah.
And one of them was actually a direct conversion from a coffee chat. So like the tips that you guys gave me and the practice really helped. Of those 3 I made it to super days. So it was the 2 buy-side firms with 𝗟𝗟𝗡𝗗𝗏 and Blackstone, and then Greenhill. And it got the Greenhill offer out of that.
So Greenhill Restructuring in New York, correct?
Yes.
So you're going to be coming to New York with summer 2025, next summer. Yeah. And you already have the sophomore, or I guess, you already have the other internship lined up, right, for this summer. So basically, it's the pension fund, right?
It's the pension fund. And so during my gap year, I'm actually going to be working as well. So I'll be working at a different pension fund starting in September.
So what do you think long run? I mean, you're set up really well. You're going to be going to a great shop with a great reputation for restructuring. Long run, are you thinking credit hedge fund, distressed hedge fund? I know I was in restructuring at Rothschild, and I know I definitely interviewed for some of those roles. Is that kind of long term, or what do you think, maybe potentially stay in the sell side?
Long term, I think definitely was, at least as of right now, I was hoping to go into, either private credit, distressed credit, or like credit hedge fund. But that remains to be seen. Haven't had, too many experiences in credit yet.
Yeah.
Or might try private equity. It just all depends, I think. So at this point, I think I'm just trying to build up as many skills as I can through different internships and then see what happens.
For sure. You're still super young. You have time to decide now. You're kind of set up really nicely for the next few summers. any kind of final words you want to share with the students listening in terms of like how to prep, or any kind of last words of wisdom?
I think it's mostly just, it's never too late if you really think about it. If you really, I guess, set your mind to it, you are at a disadvantage if you don't know at 18 that you want to go into finance or banking. But I think it's about finding the resources that you know work and have a proven track record, and then being able to capitalize on that if you're working against that upward hill of time.
Awesome. Well, Emily, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much.